Well, welcome back to Niners Nightly. Larry Krueger with you. Hope everybody's having a great Wednesday. We're taking you up till 7 o'clock. Kerry Crowley's got Giants Hot Stove at 7. You'll have Landon Roop, the curveball specialist, and JP Martinez, Giants pitching coach, joining him at 7. But with us on the Yuma guest line is Tim Kawakami from the SF Standard, who has a phenomenal piece out today on Pete Carroll. Are the Niners situation with the defensive coordinator, is it turning desperate, or is everything on schedule, and would they even consider talking to a guy like Pete Carroll? I think it's an interesting concept, and we decided to have Tim on, and he's with us on the Yuma guest line to talk about all of it and talk a little Niners. Tim, how are you? Thanks for the time.
I'm no problem, Larry. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Tim. And where are we on this thing? I mean, the Niners. Kyle Shanahan said to all of us, you were in the room, hey, you know what? I'm open to switching from the 4-3 wide 9 to a different scheme. If that's the way it goes down. And he said it, but I don't know if I was all that convinced. And obviously it looks like if he wants Saleh, if Saleh's one of the top choices, it's probably to stay with their 4-3 and their wide 9. So I guess the first one is how flexible do you think Shanahan really is when it comes to switching his defensive scheme?
Yeah, somewhat, I guess, is the answer. Somewhat flexible. If the best candidate that he thought was apart from that, I think he would certainly think about it very strongly. But if he's going to identify, someone who could do it, it's going to be a benefit to that candidate, and they're going to mostly, more than just Shanahan liking the system, which he clearly does. It's the system they've run the entire time that Shanahan's been head coach. The players like the system. Nick Bosa and Fred Warner. You don't want to mess around with what they do great and they feel comfortable with. So I think if it was going to be, or if it is going to be somebody who is away from that system, it's going to have to be a killer candidate. Vic Fangio a couple of years ago, they certainly talked about that. Definitely does not run that system. Bill Belichick, Shanahan offered it to him. They talked to Steve Spagnuolo, would not run that system. They did not take the job. They were not available. But I think you have to go to that level of a candidate if you're talking about like veering away from what 49ers have done, what they've excelled at. They have struggled at it at times. But I think if they can find somebody who runs that system, who they're comfortable with, that's what they're going to want. And that's Robert Saleh. Jeff Ulbrich was another candidate. They offered, they wanted him last year. Didn't work out. The Jets wouldn't let him go. And then now Ulbrich took the Falcons job. So I just think it's, willing to listen to a lot of different things. You want to go with whoever's best, but in their minds, if the best person could run the Seattle system, they'll be very comfortable doing that. So I'll just say I got to the Pete Carroll name. It's like I kind of was just talking it through. And I go, wait a minute, if the Pete Carroll system is the most important thing or one of the primary things you want to look at, and you're not being able to hire, possibly not being able to hire a Pete Carroll guy, you're running out of Pete Carroll guys, well, why don't you call it Pete Carroll? He seems to want to get back in coaching. I know that then I called somebody, who knows the 49ers thinking and go, yeah, I threw out a few other names. I'll put it that way. And the person said, Pete Carroll would be the name you want to be thinking about. Does not mean they've called him. Does not mean there's any negotiation. I think they really want to wait out Robert Saleh. And there's a chance that I think there's a strong chance he's available, but they don't know. He could get a head coaching job. Excuse me, and he's going to wait that out. But I think they're having to come up with some other candidates right now. I think that's the feeling I got from in there is like, wait a minute, Saleh might not be lined up for us. We haven't really talked to other people. Maybe they have quietly. I'm sure there's always feelers out there. I think there's a few feelers being thrown out to Pete Carroll and maybe a few other people at this moment. I think that's kind of the general feel is that they need some alternative candidates in case Saleh is not available to them. It's unknown. We don't know if that's going to, the Raiders could hire him. Who knows who could hire anybody at this point. Cowboys, but I think they're just having to come up with other candidates. Now, what Jacksonville does, it could determine a lot. They just fired Trent Baalke, so maybe they have to restart things. I just think the 49ers are kind of trying to line up where they want to go. And if you are thinking about the Seattle system and Pete Carroll's available, why don't you at least think about it? And I think they have at least thought about it. That's all. And the name has been brought up. And I think they're going to see what happens with Saleh too.
It sounds crazy to be like, would Pete Carroll, Pete Carroll's a defensive coordinator at this point, seems crazy. But they did offer Belichick the defensive coordinator position
Correct.
last year. And if football is littered with, guys who were, one time in bigger roles, who then in the twilight years took a lesser role. I think of like Sid Gilman, I think was a quarterback coach for the Eagles in the 80s. And obviously he's like the father of the modern pass. And you have Ozzie Newsome, you have Bill Walsh, you have guys who in the personnel side that took lesser roles and were still in the mix. I just saw Ozzie last Christmas in the press box. So he's obviously in some role with the Ravens under Eric DeCosta, who he preceded. How likely do you think it is that Carroll might be actually open to a defensive coordinator role as opposed to, only be willing to come back as a head coach?
I sure think he only wants to consider head coaching spots right now. Right now, he's involved with Raiders, maybe another spot or two. I don't think he even wants to think about a DC situation at that point. He might not want to think about any DC situation. I think he wants to get back in coaching, though. And if there aren't other situations out there for him, he'd have to think about it. 49ers defensive coordinator job pretty good, Larry. If you're a young 73, excuse me, and you want to think about getting a head coaching job next year, if you're thinking that far down the road, well, there are defensive coordinators from the 49ers who've gotten head coaching jobs. So it's the path is there. It's a good spot. Kyle Shanahan's not running that defense. The defensive coordinator runs that defense. I just theoretically, there are worse jobs if he really wants to get back into it. I know he wants to be a head coach. He wants to be an NFL head coach. That's what he wants. Understandable. Guy's done it in 14 years of the Seahawks, many other previous years in New England and with the Jets. But yeah, I think it's worth a thought. At least is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
At least worth a thought. And especially from a team that called Bill Belichick last year. That's on the record. That they did do that. And I think Belichick could have been a great choice. And I think that's always kind of been the back of Kyle's mind. So, it's up to Pete Carroll if he doesn't get a head coaching job. I just know that if you're the 49ers, you are looking for a home run candidate at this point. You need someone who's, you can't do Nick Sorensen 2.2 in 2.0. You can't do that. You need someone who instills, in confidence in your players, confidence in the owner, the general manager. Pete Carroll would be an interesting name. There are other names that are possible. He's not the only one, but man, when I just started thinking about that name, and I just said, why wouldn't they try that name? And I checked, and they go, yeah, they probably would check that name. So why not go down that road? Again, there are other names out there that are probably not maybe directly from the Carroll system, but other names. I mean, this doesn't mean it stops right here, but I definitely think that the guy wants to keep coaching. The guy has got energy. I do hear from the 49ers, they want energy. They feel there's kind of been lacking with Steve Wilkes and Nick Sorensen. I think we all see that they're different kind of guys. They're not D'Amico and solid chest bumping everybody on the sidelines. I think the 49ers kind of would like something of voltage. And God, we know Pete Carroll at 73 still got some voltage in him.
No question. And that was actually the next part I was going to ask you about. I thought that was a really interesting revelation in this piece, that maybe the Niners don't love the energy level that they've gotten on the sideline from the coordinator. Heck, Wilkes wasn't even on the sideline until they kind of forced him down onto the sideline. Sorensen was, but maybe they want somebody who's a little bit more like a Saleh, a little bit more like a D'Amico, a little bit more demonstrative, a little bit more firing up the troops. I mean, Pete Carroll is high energy. So I mean, that in some ways, when I think of high energy, I almost see Pete. He's like the definition of high energy.
And the players want that. I'll just say the players want that. Doesn't mean it's the number one priority for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, but they know it's true. Like, they know it's a factor. Like, they're aware of this, and they did not get that from Nick. They probably didn't get a lot of different things from Nick Sorensen, but I think the players identified that. Like, they just didn't feel like things were crackling on the sideline. And it's not just about chest bumps on the sideline. I mean, that's part of it. It's not all about that. It's just about the kinetic feeling you get from the guy. And, Kyle might think of it as adjustments, or other guys think of it in other ways. I think the players are like, let's get a vibe from this guy. Let's get a bounce and a rhythm. And it wasn't all there. I just hear energy. That's the word I'm hearing on this search. geez, could you connect that to anybody in the entire world in the coaching community? You connect that to Pete Carroll. So again, it does not mean he's going to pick up the phone, and he'll pick up the phone and talk. Doesn't mean that this is where it's leading. It just means they got to find some alternative candidates if the Saleh thing doesn't happen. Still could happen. If it doesn't, they need some other candidates. I think it's just a symbolic that a guy like Pete Carroll is going to be on that list.
Are we Niner fans on social media are very negative about Brandon Staley? Heck, I could have just said very negative and left it right there. But I meant about Brandon Staley, and they clearly don't like him. He spent 1 year as a coordinator. They were number one in yards and points allowed. So it can't be based on his 1 year. It has to be based on the struggles going for it on fourth down a bunch and the struggles he had with the Chargers, I guess, I would imagine. What is your impression of Staley, and how viable do you think he is to be the next DC?
I mean, if they run out of candidates, I think he would be on the list. Clearly they interviewed him, but doesn't run the Seahawks system, and I just don't see him 100% fit in the. I've heard, just from player stuff that wasn't the guy that they would be lifting up and say, hire this guy. They didn't hire him last year anyway, and with a much higher, level of experience than Nick Sorensen had. They didn't hire him. They brought him in as the assistant head coach to, I don't know what he really did, ran the ball meeting and did the DBs or did the nickelbacks or whatever he did. I didn't hear people in there, even on or off the record, saying, Jesus is really helping us. I did not hear that. And he's not quite a Shanahan kind of guy. Hard for me to quantify that. Again, they might end up hiring him. Steve Wilkes wasn't a Shanahan kind of guy. Nick Sorensen was, and it didn't work out. It's hard. You can't put exact, qualifications on how this is going to go. But Staley is, he's about Staley, which is former head coaches are like that. I understand. I'm not trying to say it's a negative. It's just those aren't the kinds of guys Shanahan has seemed to like. Saleh and D'Amico, huge personalities. We've seen it as head coaches. We see the way they interact on the sidelines. They don't really do that to the media, not as defensive coordinators. And Staley kind of has relationships with the media. So I don't know. I'm trying to kind of rambling here. I'll just say I've not heard a big positive push for Staley from the locker room or from kind of support staff in there. And he doesn't run the system. So he came in, whatever place he came in last year, Nick Sorensen. If he was behind Nick Sorensen, I don't know how he's going to jump over everybody and be a great, widely acclaimed candidate. Smart guy. I think he's going to be a coordinator or a head coach again in this league. I don't know if he's their defensive coordinator. I think there would be some bumpy kind of adjustments if he is the defensive coordinator. Joey Bosa did not like him when he was his coach in
Interesting.
with the Rams. With the Chargers, I'm sorry. He did not. It's undeniable. So, it doesn't mean that it transfers directly to Nick, but they're pretty close. That family's very close. So those sort of things are not the greatest sign, I would say, for Brandon Staley's candidacy. I think he's a really bright guy. I don't know if this is the moment and this is a team for him, though.
Provocative piece. Great stuff. Tim, on the way out the door, the one question that I kind of want to get your thoughts on, because you know this team well. There was a reference or a report that maybe the Niners didn't just want Robert Saleh, but that they would be willing to make Robert Saleh one of the highest, if not the highest paid defensive coordinator in the game. I tried to look up what that number would be. It looks like it's around $4 or $5 million, somewhere in there. Maybe my research is wrong. But what do you think? I mean, you kind of referenced that they may have offered Belichick the job again if he didn't take the Carolina job. What kind of war chest do you think? There is no cap on this, by the way. This is not a capped area. This is an uncapped area. Where do you think Jed would go? Where do you think Kyle and John would go if they could get their ideal guy money-wise?
Yeah, I think they'd go to the top. I mean, I think Matt Barrow said it on 4 Nights Plus Minus podcast with me. That's what he'd heard, that they're willing to make Saleh the highest paid defense coordinator in football.
Wow.
But if it's Saleh, I don't think they're throwing that around for everybody. I think they are aware that he has got head coaching, ideas, and he probably will be a head coach again. Well, if you want to be thinking like you're back on the head coaching trail with us, we'll pay you almost like a head coach. There are head coaches who are not making $5 million a year. I'll tell you that. I would guess that Steve Spagnuolo would probably be the highest paid coordinator. I mean, won multiple Super Bowls, so you would think that. But does not mean they were paying Nick Sorensen that, and nor would they have paid him that if he was the DC this year. I think they're willing to pay up. I think this is a close to all-in year. Doesn't mean it won't happen if it doesn't happen this year, but I think they feel like this is if you're going to throw away a year like they had to, that was last year. This cannot be anything but push it all in, go for it. Presume that your guys aren't going to get all injured like they did last year. Presume you're not going to have terrible bitter holdouts like they did last year. And yeah, I think it would add up to, okay, let's go get the best defensive coordinator we can get, and we're willing to pay him. Now, if it's not Saleh, what do you pay someone else? I don't know. I don't think Jeff Ulbrich would have been coming in at the top of the market, but Robert Saleh has earned his stripes. And so I think for him, and, if it was a Belichick or, if it's a Pete Carroll, I don't think they're going to be cheap on it. But I think for Saleh, they just think, let's go for it. Maybe he's DC for only one more year, right? He'd go get a head coaching job again. So go for it, $5 million, whatever that number is, to get the best. Will that be worth it? If you get the best out of Bosa, get the best out of Warner, get the best out of everyone, Diamolo and Orr, I think that is a great point. There is no salary cap for coaching. It's a great way to show your spending might. It's a great way to be the LA Dodgers of the NFL because there is no cap. You don't have to worry about those kind of things. There's no luxury tax on coaching. You can spend the most. And why not? Why don't you do that? Harbaugh's staff was the most expensive staff in football. Jed York did not love that, but the production was pretty freaking good.
3 NFC title games in a row.
Yeah, why not try to do some of that with a foreigner when you have to? And I think for Saleh, you might have to.
Great reporting, man. Seriously, love this piece. It was fantastic. Thanks for jumping on the radio. Tell people if they want to jump in and follow you and Dave and the SF Standard, what's the best way to do it?
Look, sfstandard.com. It's our website. It is a membership now. 3 stories are free, and then you have to join the membership, but it's not very expensive, $90 a year. It's all our stuff. You get all the the streaming stuff, all the things that we do. David does a million things. Look us up, San Francisco Standard or sfstandard.com. You can look us up.
Tim, have a great night, man. Thanks for jumping on.
Yeah, Larry. Appreciate it.